Beyond the Strange.
Natural and unexplained phenomena.
Spiritual activity.
Cryptids. The future and the past.
Conspiracies.
Beliefs and ancient remains. The radio program for you, the listener, and bringing your stories and concerns to the table.
Good evening, Beyonders, and welcome everyone to Beyond the Strange, the show that is made by the listeners and for the listeners. I am your host, Dave C., and with me is our brother, Bryan Anderson. What's up, Bryan?
How's it going tonight, Dave?
It's going good. It's going really, really good. Had a long day yesterday, but of course, you know that.
Oh, yeah.
But that was just one of the long days in this long Labor Day weekend. So feeling good though. Feeling good. How's your Saturday?
Oh, pretty good. Lots and lots of rainfall, which is really helping out with the forest fires around here.
Right. Right on. I'm a little jealous.
Oh, because of the temperatures?
Because of everything. I'm in California, and you guys are getting all the rain that we need.
Well, with the fires, with the forest fires and all the smoke over the past month, it's giving the firefighters a well-deserved break that they need. Between Washington, Idaho, and Montana here, so I can't complain too much.
Yeah, I wish I could complain, but I wouldn't complain even if we did have all that rain. I want that rain so bad.
Well, eventually you'll get it.
Yeah, no, I know. Yeah, we got that serious El Nino coming, I hope. I really, really hope. So we'll see what happens about that. But we can save that for another time and talk about that. So yes, tonight we are going to cover the MH370 Flaperon phenomenon. Bryan has been good enough to join us tonight and explain what the Flaperon is and what it has to do with the plane. But first, please follow us on Twitter at Strange Days 2015 or on our Facebook page, Beyond the Strange. We are also on Google Plus, Beyond the Strange, and you can email us at beyondthestrange@gmail.com. Our hashtag is BeStrange, and I'll be watching for your questions and your comments. Unfortunately, I won't be able to tweet right away, right back. So, but I will mention all the tweets that come through, and we'll see how many questions we can give Bryan tonight. You okay with that, dude?
I'm good with it.
Sweet. You can also Skype. Our Skype ID is 2015. Strange Days 2015. And if you have a Google Plus account, you can join us. But please be respectful and allow the current speaker finish before asking a question. Anyways, Bryan, you got anything you wanted to mention?
No, I'm good tonight.
Ready to get into that Flaperon?
Whenever you are.
I was gonna say, yeah, let's start getting into that. But before we do, I wanted to mention also that I've been recently watching some really interesting movies, and I don't know if anyone out there watches a whole bunch of movies or anything like that, but I watched like 3 movies that just left me with questions because I'm starting to really believe. And there's a guy out there that I am sure most of you heard of that does like the breakdowns of movies and how it relates to society. And one of the movies is that I saw was Interstellar. And man, talk about a fantastic movie. I mean, I don't know if anyone else. Do you think it's too soon to talk about the ending, or
No,
have you seen it, Brian?
I've seen it.
Okay, yeah, it's fairly old. It's coming up on a year, but the movie was so amazing to me that the fact that this whole time we talk about aliens and UFOs and other beings from different dimensions that are coming to aid the human race with technology and time travel and all these wormholes. But that ending really left me with the question of, is it really just us? Is it really us that's doing all that, that's coming around and showing us what we need to do to change our future? What do you think about that, Brian?
Well, I mean, there's the old adage, nobody is going to help you but yourself. If you go off that old adage, yeah, I mean, it makes perfect sense. Our future selves are ourselves, well, future human beings. And again, it's based upon evolution and what you can do and what actually you can perceive yourself to be. Nobody knows what the future is going to be like because, nothing's really set in stone.
Yeah, that's
So,
true.
yeah, I mean, I can easily see it. I mean, I can easily see the human race developing into basically a fourth and fifth dimension type of entity where it's basically, pretty much energy. Why not?
Yeah, that they mentioned that would be is it the 4th dimension or the 5th dimension? I can't remember exactly, but they 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 mentioned that in the movie that it's the dimension is gravity
Yes.
that
I mean,
they're using.
well, I mean, if you think about it, what we live in is we live in a supposed three-dimensional universe. You have length, width, and height, basically 3 dimensions, depth, you know, and then you throw in time, and then you throw in gravity, and then you throw in this, and each one would be its own dimensional aspect. And I think the last figure that I remember was something like 11 dimensions when you can actually think about it and you actually take it to its natural course as far as what aspects you would see or experience in the different dimensions. So right now we can see
Mhm.
at a distance, we see things pretty much in 3D or so yeah, in a fourth dimension, what would the fourth dimension be? So yeah, it's kind of one of those things.
Yeah, I can actually see that too. And again, that movie was awesome, and that goes into my other movie that I saw, Terminator Genesis. Now I know you haven't seen it yet, so I'm not going to talk about it too much. But that movie too, with all the time traveling in that movie and all the different outcomes that can happen, is the way that they say there is no fate. I can see that how it could relate to us as the human race and our reality today. That would just be I hope that that's the case, because the way things are going right now, it doesn't look good for the human race.
Well, it's definitely touchy at the moment. I mean, again, you come into this whole thing, and we'll probably go into this a little later, but no change comes without pain. And suffering. You cannot
Mhm.
change as an individual on a global scale, as a group. No change happens without pain and suffering, be it good or be it bad, whichever the change is. It just doesn't happen. Everything that you've ever experienced in your life that has caused you to change is dealing with happiness and sadness, pain, and the whole aspect there. So nothing ever changes in life that is comfortable. No change is comfortable.
Mhm. Yeah, a lot of people don't fair change. I do, as long as it's a positive change, of course. And I was listening to someone earlier today. I think his name was Robert Potter. I'd never heard of him before, and man, that guy was pretty amazing. I'll have to see if I can get him on the show one of these days. But he was explaining also about the coming changes and how they aren't going to be so much as an ascension like a lot of people believe. Does that make sense?
Yes.
And what he believes is the world is basically going to cleanse itself. And I mean, he said a lot of stuff. I really can't get into all of that, but the way he believes is there's definitely going to be a cleansing of the world, and we're going to be part of it, unfortunately. But hey, you know what? And he also mentioned that those who do the right thing, and I know, again, I gotta listen more about him and read up more on the material. That those who do learn how to, I guess, change with the way the world is going, will be the ones that are going to stay here, and the other ones are not, and that's just going to be the way it is. And I can fear that change. I'll do what it takes, as long as it's for the better good. I have no problem.
Well, I mean, if you go back to, oh, I forget when it came out. It was either last year or the year before. And Rick mentioned it last week, the movie Noah.
Yes.
Okay.
And
Again, it was a purge, it was a cleansing of the world, based upon that movie, if you want to go with movies. But again, even the flood was the same way, even in the biblical sense, it was a cleansing of the world.
Yep. Yeah, exactly. And then the last movie I want to talk about that I watched was Mockingjay, which is part of the Hunger Games. And this kind of ties into what we're talking about, but it also brings up the question about, is there really, I want to say so much as a secret society, but is there really like an Illuminati? Is there a group of like the 1%, like they say, that is controlling the governments, that's controlling the countries, controlling the weather, controlling the food supply, controlling everything? And when you watch Mockingjay, and there's so much symbolism in that movie, I saw right off the top. I mean, I was like, this really looks like familiar. It looks like I read the script for it already, and I already know what's going on. So it's definitely. I really believe that people are trying to talk to us, that either are from the future, or they can see into the future, or they're just trying to give us a warning of what's to come.
Well, I mean, if you take books, even movies, um, and this is purely on a theoretical basis. If you take books, movies, th- I, w- and just think about this here for a second. Say, say future you, not you precisely, but a future human being,
Mhm.
wanted to warn you of something that was coming in the future, but maybe physically couldn't make a journey physically. Okay. Talking, physiology wise, you can't transverse that gap in time. But say you could project thoughts, ideas to where the person who's doing the writing of, i.e., either the book or the manuscript, wouldn't be able to differentiate between your idea and their idea. So you wouldn't know you were doing it, even though they were giving you the idea behind it, even possibly the words all the way through and through.
Mhm.
So even though it might be fiction and it might be set in the future or it might be set in the past, who's to actually say? There's no real definitive proof as far as the time-space barrier is concerned. We have Einstein's theory of relativity and all that good stuff, and
Mhm.
so far it kind of plays out, but we're still in our infancy as as far as the universe is concerned. Human beings are still way in their infancy.
Of
So,
course.
there's still a whole different canoodle of things to discover.
Right. I mean, our brains and our minds just, they say we only use 10%. Well, I mean, of course we use 100% to live every day, but there is that percentage that we haven't even tapped into as far as I believe when it comes to spirituality and science and all those things. Real quick, I want to also say hello to Ken Lipson. What's up, homie? Haven't seen you in a while. Thanks for joining the show, and hopefully you can follow us. Also want to say welcome to Stephen Knapp. What's up, Stephen? How's it going? And Nurse Nancy and holographic Steph, of course, the Beyonders from the beginning. So yeah. Anyways, like I said, before we get into the MH370 Flaperon incident, I just wanted to mention also that we are going to take probably a couple breaks here. One coming up here pretty soon. But the last thing I wanted to bring up was also this flying humanoid. You guys have you been following that, Bryan?
I've looked at it. It with me again, when we get into the technical stuff with me, I'm of two worlds. I'm always of two worlds. One world is always competing with the other one. So I look at it and I'm thinking, okay, it's probably an exhaust cloud of some kind. They ran a test or something and it didn't work out right. But it's hard to say. I'm always teetering on that brink. It's always a fight with me. It's always a fight between two worlds, what I believe and what I know. So and I try and ride the fence as much as I can between the two. So on that one, yeah, I've looked at it, but the scientific side of the mind, the part that always deals with the engineering and everything, all the physical aspects of everything, and it says, okay, it's probably just a cloud formation. The other side, yeah, okay, maybe not so much.
Right. I mean, I was going to say it definitely looks like something. It definitely has some sort of form to it. I mean, there you can definitely see that there's a head and there's legs and even an arm sometimes that sticks out once in a while. And the way that it looks like on the film, there's 3 different angles on this one website that I saw. Actually, I saw it on YouTube. Maybe I'll post it later on the site or on the Twitter. But actually, I did post it, didn't I, Bryan? On Be Strange on Facebook.
Yes, you did.
Okay, and so there is 3 different angles that that you can see this flying humanoid. Looks like he's got shape, looks like he's got form. I really can't see his face or anything like that. But the way that it's presented, Brian, it looks like a hologram. And that goes back to what I was talking about with the technology that we have and how the people that are in that 1% are using that technology to fight against us, or not fight against us, but to control us, to make us believe what they want us to believe. And I'm just saying, it's possible that that's what it is. And you're right, Steph. It probably is the Nazis. I wouldn't doubt that at all. I mean, they probably went away for a little bit and came back in a different way. I mean, you're hearing it in the news today, and like Brian mentioned, we're gonna get into that about the way that things are today, and the way people are starting to feel how there's something going on. And Brian's going to cover that a lot. I'm going to let him let loose here in a minute, but let's go ahead and take our first break. And when we come back, we're definitely going to get into the MH370 Flaperon incident. And we are back with Beyond the Strange. Thanks everyone for joining in. Again, the hashtag is BeStrange, and we are on Facebook, Beyond the Strange. We're also on Google Plus, Beyond the Strange. Still just messing around with Google Plus. Don't really go there too much, but definitely we're there. We're pretty much everywhere. We are at Beyond the Strange at gmail.com. If you have any topics that you'd like for us to cover, or if you have any questions or any kind of feedback, please send it all this way. We will be happy to take a look. So, Brian.
Yes, sir.
let's get into this, man.
All right.
I definitely want to start by, asking you who is Bryan Anderson?
Well, let's see.
But you didn't expect that one, did you?
Well, no, I was hoping you would read it.
Well, I can actually, but I do wanted to get your basic. Well, yeah, let's go ahead and do that bio real quick. I'm sorry, I was totally caught off guard. I wanted you to give us that explanation. But why don't you go ahead and just give us a little background?
Okay. Well, I was born in the high desert in Southern California. I lived up and down the entire West Coast for the majority of my formative years because I was born to an aviation family. Every 2 years we moved. If it wasn't from state to state, it was city to city.
Mm-hmm.
Dropped out of high school when I was 16. I had a real major aptitude for electrical and mechanical things as I was growing up from a young child. So I was always messing with electronics, and trust me, my mother couldn't stand it because I was always tearing stuff apart and putting it back together incorrectly or in different ways. But dropped out of high school when I was 16. I spent time as a framer, a construction worker, a welder, an electrician. And then eventually I went ahead and got my GED when I was 24. I even worked as an electroplater, plating metals for an FAA certified shop before I got my GED when I was 24. After that, I just kind of went ahead and went into aviation, went into what you would call a family business, I guess, and went to work for Boeing. I worked for Boeing between Washington State and Texas. I finally decided to go ahead and get my airframe and power plant certificates through the FAA. I spent 14 months working a full-time job while going to school full-time. And this was when I was in Texas. And since then, I've been on the move from one job to another all over the United States. I've worked on Air Force aircraft. I've worked secret projects. I was even up for the Delta II project at Vandenberg, which was Boeing developed the Delta II rocket system. And I almost went to work for them in 2002. But mostly I've just done commercial and military aircraft throughout my career until a few years ago, I decided to go into audio narration.
Yes, and that was a very good idea, my friend, because you have the voice for it. And you have the brain for everything else. I mean, to be able to do all that before 24 and then to go to work for Boeing, that's just amazing. How was it working for Boeing? Was there a lot of interesting people that you ran across? I mean, did they seem to have the same kind of ideology and thought process as like what we do here on the show and different shows the like?
In aviation, yeah, I mean, it's kind of a mixed bag. It really is. I mean, especially when you're dealing with Air Force or aircraft technicians and Air Force personnel and all that, it really is a mixed bag because people get into aviation for different reasons. They either have an aptitude for it, they've had a yearning to do it. And yeah, I would say it's probably a 60-40 split that most people in aviation do have the thoughts that we have. They have the curiosity. They're always constantly wondering. They're always constantly looking. I mean, if you take 9/11 and all that, it's like I can't say for certain, because all you have is a rotor section for like the Pentagon. All you have is a rotor section from a turbine aircraft, from a high bypass turbine. But in a high bypass turbine, I mean, the rotors and stators are different sizes. And it's the same way with your cruise missiles. And they use the same basic technology with especially our guided missiles and our cruise missiles anymore. It's the same technology that you find in aviation. It's the same motor, it's the same power plant that's used. So
I'm sorry, go ahead. I didn't mean to talk over you.
No, go for it. I was done with my thought.
Okay. No, I wanted to ask you, it seems like, I mean, it's pretty much common knowledge that the US goes out and hires private private corporations to do their planes and their stuff.
Well, and that's what we're going to get into tonight.
Yes.
I might add that I also have 2 associate's degrees in applied science that I earned while I was going to school to get my certifications. And I was also halfway through my bachelor's degree before work took over and I ended up working a whole lot and school got left behind. So, but yeah, what happens is, and this started way back when, beginning of aviation almost. Most of aviation maintenance was kept in-house, amongst the manufacturers. They didn't hire out. If something was wrong with a plane, it went back to the manufacturer, or the manufacturer sent a team out to fix it. And that still goes on today. They're called AOG teams, aircraft on ground. So if something happens with an aircraft, an AOG team heads out. They either fly or they drive to wherever that vehicle is to repair it, to get it back in the air for the customer that owns the aircraft. And so those
And
are
we're
your,
gonna. Oh, go ahead.
but those are just your AOG teams.
And we were speaking this past week about the Flaperon, and that's going to relate to it later on when you get more into the Flaperon. So why don't we go ahead and start with that? Really cool bio, by the way, man. I'm glad I didn't say anything. It sounded great coming from you, bro.
Oh, well.
But, go ahead. Let's start with, what is a Flaperon, and how did it float as far as the island of Reunion?
Okay, well, what a flaperon is, it's a mixture of 2 components. You have a flap and you have an aileron. Okay. All right. Now, what the flap does is it extends the wing. It makes the surface area of the wing larger for takeoff and landing because of the speeds. You need a larger wing surface to gain altitude, to get off the ground, and to land because of the speeds that are involved. You're starting from almost a dead stop when you take off, so you need your wing larger. You need more surface area. It's called a flight controlled surface.
Right.
Okay, so, and also on landing, because you're reducing speed as you're coming down. So the flaps extend out. It gives the wing more surface area and more lift. When you're at cruising speed, the flaps are fully retracted because you don't need that much lift. Once you've gained altitude and gained speed, you don't need the lift anymore. The regular wing takes over that function. Now, the aileron, what it does is it controls roll. Okay, so if you look at a plane longitudinally from nose to tail, and you were to take the wings and tilt them to the left or the right, that's what roll is. It's along the longitudinal axis. What the ailerons do, and they are also a flight control surface, is they control your roll. And usually they're automatic, but the pilot does have control over them. Usually the plane senses its attitude in the air and compensates for it, and the pilot doesn't have to think about it. And autopilot takes care of a lot of that. But the pilot does have manual control over both. But with Flaperon, it's a combination of both. the aileron is combined with the flap. So when the flap is fully retracted in its normal flight attitude, the aileron takes over to control the roll. And all it is condensing. Instead for having several different pieces throughout the wing, it just kind of condenses it down to a local area. Instead for having your aileron way out at the tip, you can have several different ailerons placed throughout, but you just attach them onto the flap. And that way, when the flap's fully retracted and in flight condition, the aileron can take over. And it just sits there and acts, and it'll live and act as a trim tab. And I can get into the trim tabs, but all they do is assist in the flight surface's movement. So if you stick a trim tab up into the airstream, it pushes back. So if you need to lower flaps, you push the trim tab up, put it in the airstream, and it'll assist lowering the flaps. If the flaps are down, you push the trim tab down, and it assists the flap in retracting back into its flight configuration. So it's just using the airstream and the force of the air to help maneuver the air control surfaces, the flight control surfaces.
Well, were you surprised to find out that that's pretty much the only thing they found? Well, with all of the wreckage, that this Flaperon was found so far away, and there was nothing there. I think we were talking about, when they find the carcass and they find the black box and all that, but none of that surfaced. Seeds, bodies, anything like that. And for like almost a year and a half, they found this Flaperon just washed up. Are you surprised about that?
Actually, I'm a little on the surprise side that the Flaperon would actually show up. I would expected seat cushions, floorboards, because all these are designed to float. So they would get caught on the ocean currents, at least the upper ocean currents, and make their way to land. Basically, they're designed to be buoyant. They're designed to float. Even if you break a floorboard in half, it's made, well, there's a little different issue there with the floorboard, but we'll get into that a little bit later. But most of this stuff is designed to float, at least the loose stuff. Like I said, seat cushions, they're designed to float. Your floorboards, they're designed to float. Right. But a lot of this isn't really designed to float. And the reason is that if you have a flap, it's actually got weep holes on the bottom of it. And those are built in. You don't have any, it's not closed. Structurally, it's closed for airflow. But on the inside, it's got a bunch of open chambers. And what happens is you don't want those to fill up with water because they get heavy. And whatever system you're using, if it's hydraulic or if it's electric or electric hydraulic, it overpowers that system because it gets filled with water. Because naturally these things, some of them are sealed, like the wings, the main wings, because they're fuel tanks. They're sealed, right. And because you don't want the fuel to leak out and you don't want water to get in. But on these other flight control surfaces, they're usually not sealed, and they have weep holes, and there's several sections along a track, so you can extend out further, and they kind of fan into one another. It's not just one piece; it's usually a couple different pieces. Like with the inboard flaps, it's usually about 3 pieces. And then you get your mid-wing flap, and it's usually 2, and then your outboard flap is usually only 1 piece. But on this one, they're saying it's the inboard flap, a piece of the inboard flap, but I don't think so. I think it's actually the outboard flap.
How big are those Boeing and those planes? I mean, I know they're pretty huge, but I mean, a piece of that Flaperon, I didn't actually get to see a measurement or anything like that, but how big are they usually?
Well, by looking at the size of it, it looks like it's about 4 foot long. So,
Mhm.
and that's what makes me think that it's more the outboard flap, because your ailerons you don't want on the inboard side of the wing. You want them on the outboard side of the wing, the furthest from
Mhm.
the aircraft itself to help control the roll.
Yeah.
So I think it's
That would go ahead.
but I think it's the outboard flap. I don't think it's one of the inboard flaps.
Okay. No, what I was just gonna say is for a 4-foot flaperon, I would say that would be really hard to spot from way up in the sky. Wouldn't you
Well,
say?
it is. I mean, if you watch an aircraft go over, you won't be able to distinguish the flaps from the regular wing. As they're flying, unless they've just taken off. But if you're looking at them at cruising altitude and you're looking up in the air, you can't really distinguish. The only thing you can do is distinguish the fuselage, the wings, the empennage, which is the tail section. Those are the only things when you're looking at altitude. That's all you can do. Now, if you're searching in the water for one of these things, yeah, at 4 or 5 feet long, yeah, it's like searching for a needle in a haystack.
That's what I would think. Yeah,
But
that's
so
pretty crazy. Pretty crazy. So the investigators, they're trying to learn from all from this debris. But do you think they'll find anything else? I mean, as far as why the flaperon is so far away from the plane. Well, of course, the wreckage is crazy. But I mean, do we even know that this is the right part to the right plane?
well, okay, now we come into the maintenance aspect, and I'm
Okay.
going to try and describe this as best as I possibly can without getting too technical or anything else. Now,
Okay.
here in the United States, we have to do things, and there's a lot of paperwork to do it. Now, if something gets damaged, okay, if and this is very common. A plane's jacked up, it's getting ready to leave, you're putting it back together after it goes through a maintenance check, and it's on jacks. And they want to run the flaps to make sure that the system works, to make sure there's no air in the hydraulic system. You have to run the flaps. So what happens is, and it's unfortunate, but this is what happens, and this is quite common, is that somebody will leave a ladder underneath the flap, and they'll run the flaps, and the flap will run into the ladder. And it's very common. It's not dangerous, it's just very common because somebody doesn't do a check to make sure that there's nothing underneath the flap before they run it.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so what happens is you damage the flap. Now you've got to document the damage. And this is all done with paperwork. So the damage is documented. That documentation stays with all the paperwork for the aircraft. It's done by their 3 different identifications for the damage, other than you've got the size of the damage that was created. You've got a 3-point system of measuring where the damage occurred. And then you've got a short description of what the damage did and how bad it actually is. Now you've got maintenance manuals that tell you what is major or minor damage. Now, with minor damage, the paperwork is generated, the repair's done, the repair's signed off in accordance with the repair manual for minor damage. So nothing has to be done. All it has to do is pass QC. QC has to see exactly what's going on. Once they're happy and it's done to the book, it's good to go. But it's still part of the maintenance record of the aircraft. Now, with major damage, it's a whole different thing because then you have to get engineering involved. You've got to look at how much it's weakened that particular part of the aircraft that has been damaged. And then engineering has to go in and do their calculations and design a fix for it. Once engineering does that, then they send it off to the manufacturer so the manufacturer engineers can do their calculations and say, yes, it's good. You can do this repair. Or no, it's not good. We'll help you out here. And they do a little this, a little that, they tweak it a little bit and they send it back to you and they say, okay, this can be done this way. Now that repair designed is part of the aircraft records. So everything, every little bit of damage that you do is part of the aircraft records, be it minor or major. It's all part of the aircraft record. However, and this is a little uncommon fact, and what happens is if you damage something, it's going to take a long time to repair. But you have a sister ship, same design, say it's a 777, that's also down for maintenance. Now let's say, and we'll just use a flap, let's say we damage a flap, but it's so damaged, the plane's due to fly in 10 days, but the repair can't be done in 10 days. You've got another aircraft that's down for maintenance. It's her sister ship, belongs to the same company. It's possibly at another maintenance station or someplace else in the world, but it's not due out for 30 more days. It's expensive, mind you, to keep an aircraft on the ground, but it's expensive to do exactly what I'm going to say that they do. It's expensive, but it's more expensive to keep the aircraft on the ground. Okay. What they'll do, and it's called, theoretically, it's called stealing, but what they'll do is they'll swap parts. And it's a lot of paperwork and a lot of expense to do it. So you've got a damaged flap on one aircraft, you've got an undamaged flap on another one. You go through all this paperwork to swap parts out. They're the exact same part. They go in exactly the same way. Most times. There are some variations. But for the most part, they go in exactly the same way. They're the exact same part. But that's all tracked by paperwork. All right. So all this damage, all this swapping of parts is all controlled by paperwork. And that paperwork, once you swap that part belongs to that aircraft. It no longer belongs to the old aircraft. It belongs to this aircraft. It's a marriage. That's all that it is. It's a marriage. That and but the maintenance record for that flap doesn't go with the aircraft, doesn't go with the flap. It sticks with the old aircraft. So it's so if you go through one of these swaps, okay, you can track what aircraft it came off of. You can track all the damage that was done to it on that aircraft, but it no longer pertains to the aircraft that it went on. Mm-hmm. So it becomes a paperwork chase. So with this latest report, and they just reported, and I think it was about 2-3 days ago, that yes, they said this Flaperon was a piece of an MH370, but they had it for almost 2 months before they were able to determine that. And the way they said they were able to determine it is to use a bore scope, which is an endoscope. All it is it's a scope with a camera and a light on the end of it, and it's flexible, and you get to go in these little holes and look around for damage. You use them on engines all the time, but it's called a bore scope in the aviation field. What they said they found were serial numbers that married it to MH370. But I don't think they were reporting that correctly. I think that was a fallacy that they induced on the public. And the only reason I say that for the simple fact is that most of these serialized parts like flaps, landing gear, all this, they have a data plate on them. And it's usually bonded in because most of your flaps these days are made out of, the skins are composite material. They're fiberglass and Nomex honeycomb core just to save weight. They're not, only the leading and trailing edges are skinned in aluminum or stainless steel to protect the edges. But the main body, the framework on the inside is aluminum. Where it connects and everything else is either steel or titanium or aluminum or what have you. All the major control parts are made out of durable metal, but the skinning of it is this fiberglass composite material to lighten the weight of it. But these data plates, are normally installed usually on the leading edge, the very forward edge of the part, and they're usually either riveted or bonded on. You usually don't have anything inside because you can't see it. It has to be visible to the maintenance technician that's doing the work. So therefore, you're not going to have any serial numbers, aircraft numbers, or anything like that on the inside of these parts. You'll have part numbers that are stamped in there and the date they were manufactured and all this good stuff. But as far as the parts numbers are concerned, they're not serialized. The individual part numbers are not serialized. It's all the major component that is, and some of the subcomponents.
Which would be the plane, as far as the serial number is concerned, because the part numbers, like you said, it's just a part. It's not the actual whole, the plane as a whole.
Unless it's a major integral part, it's not going to have a serial number to it. It's just going to have a part number. So the Flaperon itself, yeah, it's going to have a serial number. Is the aileron? No, it's probably just going to have a part number because it's part of the assembly. Just the assembly itself is going to have the serial number in most cases. But those serial numbers are not going to be on the inside because you would never be able to see them. They're always on the outside where you can see them, to where they can be verified.
Gotcha. Wow, this is all fascinating. We are talking with Bryan Anderson about the MH370 Flaperon incident. This is Beyond the Strange, and you're listening on YouTube. You can join us on Twitter at Strange Days 2015. Hashtag is Be Strange. And Gunny comes in with a question, says, I heard the report that the serial numbers were inside the Flaperon.
Okay, again, you're going to have a data plate for that Flaperon because it's an assembly. Those serial numbers have to be on the outside. So when you remove it, in order for the quality control personnel to say, yeah, you can put it back on, they've got to verify it's the same part and same serial number that came off that individual aircraft, or that the part that came in that you robbed from is the actual part number and serial number that you requested, so it can go back on the aircraft and become married with it. So those have to be readily available and readily visible to the maintenance technician and the quality control personnel that are running that aspect. So if it's ever taken off, they can verify, yes, it goes on this aircraft. It's this part number, this serial number, manufactured on this date, so it can go on that aircraft because that's what it's married to. So on the inside, it makes it improbable, not impossible, but improbable that they found a serial number. But I think I know how they figured it out.
Okay.
And why it took so long.
And that was going to be one of my other questions, but we won't get into that until we take a break. This is Beyond the Strange. My name is Dave C. We're talking with Bryan Anderson, and we are talking about the Flaperon incident. I also wanted to go back and bring up the fact that the timeline of of the MH370 first went missing back March 8th, 2014. And since then it's there's just been really nothing. It's just really odd that a part would come up now. And to me, I guess what I'm getting at, Brian, is it feels like maybe it was put there somehow.
Well, okay, let's look at it. It was barnacle encrusted. So it's been in the water for quite some time. Barnacles just don't grow overnight. They take quite a period of time to form and grow. And it's got to be slow moving. Barnacles are not quick creatures. They're very slow. Whales have barnacles. Ships have barnacles. And they only pick up the barnacles when they're in port. The barnacles continue to grow when they're out at sea. But, and you would think that, yeah, it could have been planted there. However, there's this little thing, and this is the part that gets me, because I've heard these reports as well. Well, there's no way it could have floated there because it's not designed to float. In essence, it's not designed to float. Remember those little weep holes I talked about that let water out. But let's say it broke off the wing when it impacted. If that's exactly what happened to MH370, it broke off the wing. Or it broke off when it hit the bottom, whichever the case may be. If it's in, there's this thing called, and they even went through, from what I heard, even people that oceanographers and people associated with dealing with ocean currents and all this said there's no way it could have floated from any place in the Indian Ocean to this island, because it would have sunk to the ground or we would have discovered it floating. Well, unfortunately, there's this thing called neutral buoyancy, where you don't sink, but you don't float. The weight, and this is probably undoubtedly what happened, is when it broke off, it got water in it, but it righted itself to where no more water could get in it. And it had a neutral buoyancy. The weight of the part was the exact, and actually it deals with the air that was in the part, is exactly the same density as the water around it. So it can neither sink nor could it rise to the surface. It just floated along in the median along with the current. And currents normally, unless it's a riptide, don't move that fast. And it probably, and I say probably, did it at, probably about be midway between, someplace in the strata between the surface and the ocean bottom. But this whole thing with neutral buoyancy, it's kind of strange. Divers use it. Our Navy uses it with submarines, unless you blow ballast and you rise to the surface. It's all designed around neutral buoyancy. And they somehow forgot this throughout their whole thing over almost the past 2 months about neutral buoyancy. It's like, I don't know if they, suddenly forgot the term or what it actually implied, but I'm pretty sure that's how it got there. And then once it got closer to the island, the natural waves took over and tossed it up on shore.
Yeah, a lot of that went in. I mean, that does sound, it sounds logical. And one of the other things I want to point out too, looking at this timeline, I can post it on later on, but it's the last thing that they showed was last year, September 30th, and it was it says here it was armed with new 3D maps of the southern Indian Ocean floor. Search vessels started to focus on a 350 nautical mile long stretch of seabed for the MH370. Chinese and Australian scientists mapped the floor to help Netherlands-owned Fugro Equator and Phoenix International-owned GeoPhoenix start a new mission in October, searching for the depths of the ocean. This is the newest search after a 4-month delay. And since then, there's nothing on this timeline up until March 8th, 2015, this year. And like you said, they've been kind of like really, I don't know, I want to say hesitant to come out and say this is the Flaperon of the MH370, and with certainty.
Well, and I think the reason, and this is just me going off of what I know and what I've dealt with dealing with maintenance.
Sure.
And, give the Australians a big round of applause because they've kept this search going all this time trying to find this aircraft.
Right.
And, and before this even happened, keep in mind, before this even happened, not a lot was really known about the Indian Ocean as far as topography was concerned. Nobody had gone in there, and that's the way we are. We don't pay attention to our own world. We pay attention to everything else. But nobody had gone in there and done any serious mapping of the Indian Ocean. So they were basically, again, trying to find a needle in a haystack and hoping for the best. And now they may have been a couple hundred miles off, but that's that. But let's go into this whole maintenance deal. Now, a lot of aircraft maintenance has gone over to Asian countries. Singapore is a major maintenance hub for many aircraft, for many airlines these days, because the labor is cheap. The Philippines as well. They're ones who do a lot of aircraft maintenance as well, because the labor is cheap. I'm not saying these people are not untrained. I'm just saying the labor is cheap. And the people that go over there belong to the aircraft industry. They belong to the airlines that they work for, and they are there to oversee the maintenance of their aircraft. And they're assigned 1 or 2 aircraft at a time, and it's usually a team of 4 to 5 people that oversee every aspect of the maintenance of that particular aircraft, or those 2 particular aircraft. And it's, like I said, it's usually a team of 4 or 5 people that are over there, but they've served in maintenance, so they oversee the maintenance of it. But on that thing, and I think why it took them so long to say, yes, this actually belongs to MH370. I think the reason that it took so long for them to do that is that other countries, other second and third world countries, aren't as diligent with their aircraft maintenance records as the United States or Britain or Germany or any of the, higher nations of the world. They're not as diligent with their record keeping. And what I think possibly happened, and this is only speculation again, is that either a Flaperon got switched between another aircraft that was down for maintenance, or damage occurred that wasn't put in the aircraft records. So once you skew the actual physical attributes of that component, you can't say, and you lose, and the data plate pops off or gets lost or gets rubbed away, what have you. There's nothing there to identify it again. You have to go through all those maintenance records, and you have to match up repairs. And it's very tedious because you have to match up the repairs. Well, I've got this damage here, does that match up? Does this match up? And that's after you scrape the barnacles off, of course, and take away the paint. You've got to sit there and go through all this, go through the paperwork of the aircraft, everything dealing with damage to that particular component. And then you've got to match it up. And what I think they were running into is stuff wasn't matching up. The maintenance, the repairs done to it, and everything else haven't matched up or weren't matching up. And it probably came about that either the Flaperon was exchanged to another aircraft, a sister ship, or that they figured out, okay, most of the repairs on this do match up. or some of the repairs do match up, but not all of them. And that's because of undocumented maintenance, I think. And again, like I said, it's just complete speculation.
Yeah, it's very possible. And, you know, I want to mention to the audience that this is all theory and speculation. And I want to make the disclaimer to, first of all, I don't want to say that I have the final say on this. I mean, Bryan would agree. You know, there's a lot that's we just don't know about. You know what happened with this this wreckage. It's a mystery, and we're just doing our best to figure it out. Gunny comes in and says that the Flaperon is definitely a 777 part, and there was only one 777 missing. He says only two 777s have been lost. One was shot down in the Ukraine, and MH370. Is that right?
Yes, that's correct.
So, yeah, I mean, it's definitely it's going to go on for quite some time, I think. But I really just hope we can find more of the wreckage, and it'd be nice if the Australians continue doing what they're doing so well. Maybe finding the carcass and the black box. This is Beyond the Strange, and I want to thank you for joining in. We're going to go to a quick break here, and we're going to return with Bryan Anderson and continue talking about the MH370. So stick around. And we're back. This is Beyond the Strange, talking with Bryan Anderson about MH370. You can actually Skype us at Strange Days 2015. Our hashtag is Be Strange, and we are on Twitter. Follow us at Strange Days 2015. So, Bryan, getting back to the maintenance. Can the investigators, just trace the debris back to where it came from?
Well, first, let me say that Gunny is correct. Undoubtedly, using deductive logic, yes, this Flaperon belongs to MH370.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, undoubtedly it does. Using using that logic, yes, it does. There's no other aircraft that it could belong to because of the different style of aircraft. The 777 is its own plane, its own dimensions. They didn't borrow anything from any of the other aircraft in production. If you take a Boeing 767 and a Boeing 757, most of that, other than the only difference really between the two, they use basically the same systems, same size flaps, same size flaperons, same size ailerons. Almost all their systems are the same, except for the only difference is the tube diameter. A 767 is a double aisle aircraft. Its tube diameter is wider than what a 57 is. But pretty much almost everything else, all the systems on a 57 and a 67 are almost exactly identical. And all they did that, the only reason they did that is because it saved cost. When they did that with a 777, that was from the bottom up when it was designed. So, but I believe this is truly a Flaperon, the Flaperon from MH370.
That's what it boils down to. Yeah, we pretty much knew that. I mean, in the beginning, it seemed like it was just like some sort of supernatural disappearance. Like it flew over the Bermuda Triangle, and all of a sudden it just disappeared, and nobody knows where it went. Or the conspiracy theories were that it landed in, was it Puerto Rico or something like that? Maybe.
No. Oh, what's the name of that island? Oh Lord, yeah, my brain's blank at the moment.
It sounded like a Spanish name. I don't remember exactly, but yeah, it was hijacked and taken, and they all sound like good theories, but the unfortunate, the unfortunate conclusion is that it's been wrecked, and pretty much everyone on that plane didn't survive, and that's a tragedy. But getting back to what caused it, what could have caused this plane to crash?
Well, there's a number of things other than the pilot doing it, which is the main theory out there, I think, is that the pilot did it. But there are a number of things that could have done it. Could it have been done remotely? It's very difficult. It's not impossible, but it's very difficult to do it remotely. My guess, and this is again until the flight data recorders are found, and there's no saying what kind of condition those flight data, the flight recorders, either the voice recorder or the data recorder, what condition they're going to be in after being at the bottom of the ocean this long, especially the Indian Ocean. But you could have had, and it would almost seem right. You could have had a system malfunction. I know that they said it climbed rapidly, then descended rapidly before it leveled out. Now, with that, you could have had one of the flight control surfaces could have, because its natural attitude when the engines are going is to fly in a straight line and level.
Mm-hmm.
All right. That's going to be its natural attitude, is to fly a straight line and fly level, whatever altitude it levels out at, it'll fly a straight line until it runs out of fuel. And that's the only way to shut down these engines. You've got a throttle. All the throttle does is control the fuel going to the engines. The only way to shut down the engines is to cut off the fuel to them. That's the only way to shut them down, unless they stall. But you could have had a major malfunction with the elevators. The elevators would have done it in a heartbeat. Say something happened to one of the elevators, it would cause your nose to pitch up for you to climb steeply until you reached a certain altitude, and when it banked back over, much like doing a hammerhead maneuver with a standard prop aircraft, and then eventually it could have, and I say could have, leveled itself off, or possibly the autopilot kicked in. One of those last-ditch efforts from a flight crew, one of the flight crew could have switched on the autopilot at the last minute and caused a plane to level off, but not have a destination. Because these planes can take off and land on their own. All you got to do is program your destination, your departure and your destination into the flight management computer, and you really don't have to do anything. You just tell it to go, and it goes, and it'll go from beginning to end. It'll fly itself the entire course. The only thing that the pilots like to do the takeoff and landing by hand manually. For flight time, obviously, to get, I've flown this plane for this long. Most of the time what the pilots are doing is they're on autopilot, and they're not even touching the controls. They're just there to monitor the systems to make sure everything's correct. For the majority of the time, that's what your pilots do these days. It's not like the old days where they actually flew. These days, they're just there monitoring systems to make sure nothing screws up. If an emergency happens, they are there to control it. So basically their job, their function is to make sure you get from your destination from your departure to your destination safely. That's their job, and they do a fine job of it. I'm not knocking pilots.
Right.
So now but like I said, what I think probably happened is you probably went through possibly a rapid decompression. It could have been one of the pilots were flying manually when it happened. If you went through a rapid decompression and you went through a rapid altitude climb, then you would naturally pass out from a lack of compressed air, from the pressure differential from what's inside the aircraft and what's outside the aircraft. It's not from a lack of oxygen. It's the pressure differential itself that knocks you out. If you level out at an altitude of, say, 20 to 30,000 feet, even though you're passed out, eventually you're going to asphyxiate yourself because you don't have compressed oxygen to breathe.
Right.
So now you could, like I said, you could be talking about a rapid decompression. Possibly the co-pilot was flying, didn't know how to handle it, accidentally bumped the wrong thing. Up you go, down you come. Somebody flipped on the autopilot, it leveled off and flew itself. It could have been something in the flight management that did it. Could have been a quirk in the flight management, although highly doubtful.
Gunny came in with a question. Well, more of a statement into a question. He says, being it was Boeing, it wasn't as computer controlled as an Airbus would have been. Correct?
Correct. Boeing is fly-by-wire. With Airbus, instead of her having a yoke and your throttles and everything, you've got your throttles and all that, but you've got a joystick because it's all controlled by electronics, instead of her having a hard physical connection. So yeah, I mean, it's harder with a Boeing aircraft for remote access. And again, it's hard to do it from outside, from the exterior of the aircraft. Obviously it's been proven that you can do it from the inside of an aircraft, so long as you're able to gain a hardwire interface. As far as remote is concerned, a lot more difficult. You've got a lot more to go through.
Yeah, I can see that. Going back to this timeline that I was talking about earlier, it looks like on July 29th at 9 a.m., it said the beach cleaners discovered airplane debris on the beach of La Reunion Island in the Indian Ocean. Malaysia's chief investigator said the item is a 6-foot long piece that looks like a flaperon, part of the plane's wing. You weren't that far off, Brian. It was actually 6 foot long.
Yeah, I didn't work that many 777s in my time. I've only worked a couple of them.
Yeah, I mean that's pretty darn accurate. And July 30th, Malaysian authorities declare they're almost certain the debris found on the Indian Ocean island coast came from a Boeing 777 aircraft. French authorities will ship the debris to Toulouse, France. Is that right? Toulouse, France. The Malaysian Prime Minister Najib Razak said La Réunion is a French territory. Members of the cleaning crew that found the initial debris Wednesday also discovered a suitcase with wheels near the same location. I didn't hear anything about that.
Oh yeah, I remember that. Yeah, there was, but they haven't said anything about it from that initial report.
Now, August 5th, the Malaysian Prime Minister Najib Razak confirms that the found Boeing 777 Flaperon is from the wing of the MH370's plane. French analysis at the Toulouse, southern France, matched plane parts. Investigators will also examine the metal on the Flaperon with microscopes to try and find out what caused the plane to go down. Now, is that for the barnacles?
Well, you can, okay. And you have de Havilland to thank for this. What the de Havilland comet proved to aviation experts is that cycle time is a big factor in airframe wear. Okay.
Mhm.
Imagine you constantly inflating and deflating a balloon. What is that balloon eventually going to do? Eventually it's going to wear out and it's going to pop when you go to inflate it. Well, the de Havilland comet proved that suddenly, and this was, I want to say, the 1930s. About the 1930s. The de Havilland comet, they suddenly started dropping out. They started breaking apart in midair. They were having all sorts of aircraft accidents with the de Havilland comet. And what they did is they took one of the airframes, and God loved the Brits. They took one of the airframes and they submerged it in water and kept pumping air into it and deflating it, just like you would do with a balloon. They would pump air into the airframe and take the air out. And they did this over a period of time. And what they found out is that stress fractures occur in the airframe from all the inflating and deflating, from the pressure itself, the differential pressure. the constant pressure changes. It puts stress fractures into the airframe, and eventually you had a catastrophic failure, which is what these comets were going through.
Mm-hmm.
So what you have is when they put the metal under, what they're going to do is the pressure in the ocean, at the bottom of the ocean, is a lot more than what you get on the surface of land. It's like, depending on the depth, it can go up to 500 times as much easily. So they can actually, depending on where this flaperon was floating and which strata of the ocean, you can actually look at it under a microscope for stress fractures and do some calculations and figure out how much pressure was on the metal.
That's very good. Okay. Yeah, the closer you get to the bottom, the more pressure you're going to get, and the more it's going to get crushed.
Exactly. And that's exactly what they're going to look at is the pressure that was involved, what stresses were put onto the metal itself. Because it looked like a pretty solid piece. It didn't look like it had that much damage to it. Obviously, it broke off the wing itself, but it's only kind of hinged in place. It is bolted, but the bolts are shear bolts, so they probably sheared off.
We are talking with Bryan Anderson about the MH370 Flaperon incident. This is Beyond the Strange. I am your host, Dave C., and I wanted to just put it out there. Anybody has any questions, please hashtag Be Strange. I'll be happy to read them out, or you can be a part of the show and join us with your Google Plus account. Join us at the Hangouts. I'll be happy to send you an invite. That way you can come on and we can do a roundtable or, just shoot through a bunch of questions. You can also Skype us at Strange Days 2015. Bryan, what does this all mean? I mean, as far as finding the Flaperon, do you feel that this is going to be the only part they find, or do you feel that we're getting closer to finding the rest of the wreckage?
Well, they're going to look at the barnacles. Well, I think they already have, actually. And they're saying that they've got to move their search area further towards the equator because that's where this particular barnacle is more located at because of the warmer ocean currents. So theoretically, they've been searching in the wrong place. But again, all the telemetry was gone. They didn't, obviously Malaysia Air didn't pay for their the maintenance prospect where you ping from the satellites, the engine pings from the satellites for trends. It does it like every hour and a half, whatever the cycle time is on the engine, and basically it pings that information. So you get, basically it's a run of the engine. It's like if you put your motorcycle on a dyno, to basically you're just looking for engine trends to see if it's wearing down, to see if the pressures were correct, to see if the oil pressure is correct, to see what your revolutions are, to make sure that the bearings, the oil, everything that is part of that engine is working correctly and within the specs of that engine for it to work correctly. So it's called trending. And by trending, you can see how long you can go. They can tell you when that engine needs to be maintained. You need to take the engine off to have it serviced at this time because you're getting close to the end of your cycle time. So they look at those trends, and since they weren't paying for that feature, the satellite didn't ping like it should have. So they can only go with guesstimations. And, GPS is good and satellites are good, but they're not all inclusive. So, and could it have yeah, easily. It could be further south than what they're thinking. And that could be a reason why you never saw a debris field, because the debris, and there has to be debris, it doesn't matter what it is, but that debris field is probably, with the ocean currents and everything. And like I said, the Indian Ocean is, other than the shipping lanes and the flight lanes, nobody's out there. No one is out there in the middle of the ocean, of the Indian Ocean, doing whatever, because it's not used. You have your established shipping lanes, you have your established flight lanes. Unless you're just out there errantly flying around for absolutely no good purpose, you wouldn't spot this, or you're out there sailing around on the ocean looking for a shortcut or something. But the Indian Ocean has been sailed for millennia now, thousands of years. It's well known, right. and those trade routes are well established, and barely anybody goes out of them. So if they were searching in the wrong area to begin with, then yeah, that debris field would never have been spotted. And by now it's spread all over the Indian Ocean someplace. because over time, that's what it's going to do. It's going to disperse.
And it's going to sink, and you're basically not going to be able to see it unless you do the radar.
Yes, unless you go with the sonar and start mapping unless you start mapping all of the Indian Ocean, yeah. And even then, it's probably about a 1 in 50 chance that you'll actually figure it out from the regular topography of the bottom of the Indian Ocean.
Yeah, definitely going to be a mystery. I did want to ask you one more question. As far as the military is concerned, why wouldn't I mean, you have the Navy, you have the Air Force. Did it seem to me that they were also hesitant to look for this plane? Is that something that the military doesn't do because it's a private industry, or why would they, or would they not join in on the help? This wreckage.
Well, they did loan out what was it called, Bluefin, I believe, which was one of their sonar drones, and a couple of the ships to aid in the search.
I didn't hear anything about it. That's why I was asking you if you'd known something about it.
Well, and then you've got to remember, this is not the U.S.'s part of the world. This is not, the U.S. Navy's part of the world. It's the Indian Ocean. It's close to the Pacific, but it's not, and it's actually interconnected with the Pacific. But it's not something that's really in our control. It's not something that we look for. I mean, right now, with the hostilities that are in the world, I'm sure our military is... you got the Chinese war vessel, the Chinese ships that were in the Bering Straits, the Bering Sea last week. The report of that. So I'm sure our naval forces are more than, stretched thin at this moment. And again, you've got the whole political thing and everything else going on. So
that's true. That is true. Well, Bryan, I want to personally thank you for coming on and taking the time to explain the Flaperon and how it was identified and everything that you just shared with us. I really appreciate it, and thanks again.
Oh, my pleasure.
That was a really awesome explanation, and that was just a really great quasi interview, I guess. But let's go ahead and take our final break, and when we come back, speaking of tensions in the world, we feel that there is something going on in the world right now that is just really not being explained. And when we come back, we're going to talk about that. And I'd love to get the audience's opinion on what they feel is happening in the world. Again, this is Beyond the Strange. We are talking with Bryan Anderson, and we are also wanting to get your feedback. You can hashtag us at BeStrange. You can follow us at Twitter at Strange Days 2015. And you can also Facebook us at Facebook, Strange Days. Oh, excuse me, Beyond the Strange. And we'll be right back right after this. Welcome back, everybody. This is Dave C. I'm your host for Beyond the Strange. And I wanted to also point out that we are here from 6 to 8 every Sunday night. Right now, we're talking about Bryan Anderson about the MH370. We also want to talk about not so much current events, but just a feel for the world and what's happening right now. Apparently, we're going into this month of September where total chaos and disaster is about to strike at any moment. We see it in the stock markets. We see it with tensions with China and with North Korea. We've been having all this tension with Russia and seeing different things happen before us with all the shootings and mass destruction everywhere. It just seems like there's a fear going around into the world that somebody is causing this chaos, somebody or something. And Bryan wanted to bring this up. And Bryan, I want to hear your take on it.
Well, it seems to me now I've been feeling it for about a year now, and it's increasingly gotten the feel I get it has increasingly gotten stronger, and it's just a feel. It's nothing I can pinpoint a finger on saying, oh, it's this or oh, it's that. And the people that I've talked to and the people that I communicated with, they can't put their fingers on it either. They can't say, oh, it's this or it's that. It's just this increased feeling. And you can't say if it's good or bad, but it just makes you feel, what's the word I want to use here? Like something's going to change.
Mm-hmm.
But nobody can point a finger to it. I mean, there's religious aspects that we can cover here, biblical aspects that we could cover. That we probably should touch on. There's the IMF and the International Monetary Fund in October. The later part of October are supposed to be releasing a currency that is supposed to compete with the US dollar. We've got a super blood moon at the end of this month that leads into a lot of this religious possibilities about what may happen. So, or you could chalk it up to a paradigm shift, which I've seen other explanations for, a raising in human consciousness. But nobody seems to be able to put a finger on it. And to me, it doesn't bode well with me. And it may be because I'm sensitive to change. I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
But I feel more oppressed than I do happy by the entire feeling. It's more of an oppressive feeling to me. And I don't know why.
Yes, I feel the same way. I feel that out of all the doom and gloom scenarios over the past 3 decades, first we had the and this is recent with me in my lifetime. You have the Y2K, and then following that, right after that, pretty much, we had 9/11, and it just seemed to steamroll after 9/11. I heard more. You hear more about the Illuminati. You hear more about the NWO. You hear more about all the chemtrails in the sky and all just everything that's been going on, that's been leading up to this point. I it's just recently that I've been hearing more of the paradigm shift, this ascension that we are supposedly supposed to go through, and hopefully for a better, because like I said, this world's getting pretty sick. I mean, I'm starting to see, and this is my experience, how what you were talking about with the blood moons and some of the biblical prophecies. It's not going to get better anytime soon, folks. I don't want to scare you or put you into a fear mode, but I feel that we should at least be aware of our surroundings and be prepared. And I think that this is something that we should all really take into consideration. Tell your loved ones before they leave how much you care about them, how much you love them, how much you feel about them. I try to tell my loved ones just about every day how I feel. And it's not always a bed of roses. We get into arguments, we get into our fights and whatever. But I always want to make a point to get back to them and let them know that I really care about them and I love them, and I try to show it by spending my time with them, learning things with them, that sort of thing. But it's just something that you never know what's going to happen when you leave and walk out that door. That's my opinion, Brian.
Well, no, and you don't. And this is something that I believe my wife's mother gave her, and it's called the Harbinger. Okay, and this goes back to biblical prophecy. Okay, and what they're saying is every 7 years. Okay, so if you go from September 2001 to the downturn financially in September of 2008, and now we're at September 2015, which is 7 years along. And then you bring in the whole super blood moon thing where and this is the last one, and this deals again with the religious aspect. Basically, whenever you have a super blood moon in the Jewish faith, it means something is going to happen that is not good. So we sit there and we're and then you've got what's going on with the Syrian refugees, and the civil war in Syria, and all our own from Central and South America, the refugees coming from Central and South America up to the United States last year and this year. I mean, there's so much going on, and I see very little good about what's going on in the world today myself, just by looking at it.
Yeah. Yeah, I totally agree. I mean, it's every day. And here's the other thing, Brian. It seems like the media, the mainstream media, of course, is not covering what needs to be covered as far as the positive. There's people out there who are doing great things, and it almost seems like you have to go to social media to get the good things that happen in the world, because mainstream media just wants to cover all the garbage, all the bad, all the fear, all the anger. I mean, you're seeing not only a civil war in Syria, you're seeing a civil war in America right now. Now it's funny because one of the Fadernauts, Walter Lewis, he's like a John Teeter buff, and Jimmy's a John Teeter buff and everything, and all the shows that were done on John Teeter. and how they mentioned that, John Teeter predicted some of the things that are happening, and maybe not to, a perfect, point, but some of it seems like it is happening as far as civil war is going, and it's almost like something is going out of its way to make it happen. Real quick, I want to say to Steph, or I want to just read her tweet out there. I feel a wave of understanding coming over the general population. It will be good for the good ones. For the bad ones, not so much. And that's right. I mean, it's I'm also learning a philosophy. It's part of Buddhism, but it's something that came to me that it's almost esoteric in a way, that I had never heard of it before until somebody came to me and told me about it, and then all of a sudden it just started to blow up. But I'm following something called Falun Dafa, Falun Gong. It's an ancient Chinese way. The exercises are like yoga. The philosophy is definitely Buddhism, and it's a cultivation of your life so that you can ascend to a higher consciousness, and leave all the crap behind. Of course, I don't always follow that, but I will tell you one thing: doing the exercises alone makes me feel so much better. And I really hope that this is true about hopefully getting to a higher ascension.
Well, I would hope so. And yeah, Gunny is saying that your audio is scratchy, and I've been noticing it as well. So,
I just saw that. I apologize for that, everybody.
but no, I mean, in all honesty, yeah, when we go back to it, all the way through time, whenever something's occurred, be it either religious or, man-made or whatever, the ones that the people that believe in themselves and other people have been the ones that have the tendency to survive. And yeah, in major media, all you get is the super, super negative, or you get the stuff that doesn't matter. What's Kim Kardashian doing, or any of that stuff. You get the fluff. Or you either get the negativity or you get the fluff. And the ones that are actually doing true good and trying to assist people are the people themselves. And they don't have this big following. It's not, they're not out there to make a name for themselves by what they're doing. They're just trying to help their fellow man, their fellow person in this case. And they don't get that much of a following. They don't get that much recognition. And I wonder, and I seriously wonder if we're approaching another one of those times, like another purge, like with the flood, or maybe it is an ascension of some type. It's just, again, like I said earlier in the broadcast, change is hard. It's very, very difficult. Do I think we're going into a civil war in the United States? Absolutely. We're already in one. Just when I thought we had left race and race wars behind, we're getting ourselves into it again. And it seems just like history is continuing to repeat itself with the vileness that we've already experienced.
Yes. But it also seems perpetrated.
Oh, agreed. I totally agree that it's perpetrated on the people. And I think most of that comes from your major media, or the major perpetrators, but who's behind the major media? So, we've got to go there too. Is major media controlled by those that have the most political clout and the most money? I tend to think so.
Yes. The ones that want to keep control and even gain more control. And this is why, Bryan, I do the show, and I'm so happy that you are able to co-host with me, because these are the answers that we want to follow. We want to learn. We want to learn these answers and find the truth for the audience, for you guys. And like I said, everyone out there, if you have any kind of information that you want to share, you can always email us at beyondthestrange@gmail.com, or you can tweet to us at Strange Days 2015, or leave a post on our Facebook, Beyond the Strange. We'd love to hear and see everything that you guys. I mean, Dennis Koch, he's been leaving stuff lately that are it's just amazing. We have Gunny and Steph and Lisa, Steven K28. I mean, the list goes on. You guys are awesome. We want to find the truth. Send us your information. Let us know what you feel. It can't just be me and Bryan that feels this way. Gunny brings up also that he says the feeling I get is apprehension. What I think is coming is a massive paradigm change. Hope we come through in one piece. I hope so too, man. I mean, I really, really do, because it does feel like the clock is ticking in a way, but I want to feel like it's going to be a good thing. I want to feel like we're gonna transcend into something that's more positive. And the people the 1% that are trying to control the society, I want to believe that karma's going to get them in the end.
Well,
what they've been doing to us and to this planet, it's finally going to catch up to them, and they're definitely going to get what they deserve.
Well, if you look at it on a historical perspective, those people that have always tried to control society society has come back and gotten rid of those people. Mm-hmm. And that's just the way that it is, because society can only take so much. And then eventually society wakes up and says, wait a minute, hang on. You guys are wrong. We're right. We want it done this way, and you guys aren't doing it. But in this case, and I think Gunny's right, that's the way I feel. It's apprehension. Something's going to happen. And the only thing I can say to everybody out there, and it's not just you and I, and it's not just Gunny, and it's not just Lisa, and it's just not Steph. I think everybody more on a big basis is feeling this, which comes into, collective consciousness. I think we all feel it because we're all interconnected in some way or form. Mm-hmm. As a collective, as a whole, we're all whole. So what you can't do is you can't lose your faith. You can't lose your belief, whatever it may be. You've got to hold on to that and believe in yourself and believe in the people that you trust, your family, your friends, the ones that you trust. You just don't lose your faith. You've got to hold on to your faith. And it doesn't matter what faith you're holding on to.
Yes, that's definitely true. I know, just going through my life and looking back, how many religions and faiths I looked into. Of course, it was mostly Christian, Judeo. This is the first time I've ever looked into anything like Buddhism. It's always gone against my belief, but the spirituality aspect of it, that's the more important, in my opinion, the more important aspect of this, because once our body is gone, our soul continues, and I believe that. And whether you believe in God, Allah, Muhammad, it doesn't matter. It's if it's good, then we're going to definitely just continue to evolve, and not just our bodies, not physical bodies, but our mind and our spirit. And that's what I think what we're here for right now, is to continue to just share the knowledge and pass it on to those who don't know what's happening. I mean, there's a lot of people out there. Yeah, and I kind of hate the term sheeple because they don't know. They're caught up in this whole mess, and I feel bad for them. It's just, you do get frustrated. You want to tell them, look up in the skies. Come on, that's definitely a chemtrail. It can't be a contrail. Or the food that's being modified today, or the water we're drinking that's being they're putting fluoride in it. That's what the Nazis did. It's definitely something that's attacking us, and we need to fight back.
Absolutely. And that's what I said. Don't lose your faith. Don't lose your belief. Yes, we have to fight back, be it on your grassroots level, if that's what you want to call it, politically, be it, helping the less fortunate. It's all fighting back against what is going on. And that's the kind of fight you want to do. You want to do the good fight. You don't want to do the bad fight.
Right. And you want to fight with your brains, as more than just your muscle. And I always feel that it always starts at home. You teach your children the good things. Don't teach them to bully people. Don't show them that violence is the key to treat people so you can get what you want. It starts at home by showing your children love, showing your brothers, your sisters, your wife, your husband, your mom, your dad. Show them the love that a family deserves it to show and to feel. I can't express that enough, but it's just something that's been on my mind, and I'm glad you brought that up, Bryan. I mean, I know there's a lot of people out there who feel the same way. And again, I want to say thank you, Bryan, for coming on and explaining the MH370 Flaperon. You can always talk to Bryan on here on Beyond the Strange. You can tweet us at Strange Days 2015. Bryan watches those just as much. Hashtag Be Strange. Bryan, do you have anything that you want to plug? Or I don't want to say plug, but is there anything going on that you'd like to share?
No, I just want to the main thing is I just don't want people to lose hope. That's the only thing. I just don't want people to lose hope.
Mm-hmm. That's good. I think we all need to hang on to that hope. And thanks, Kenny. I feel it was a great show too, man. And I hope everyone has a great Labor Day out there tomorrow, and hope they had a great weekend and it continues on into tomorrow. I want to thank our guest, Bryan Anderson, for coming on and explaining the MH370 Flaperon. I learned a lot today. I hope you guys did too. Ken Lips, and if you're still out there listening, man, right on, homie. I'm glad you found your way. Glad you found your way to us. Hit me up, man. We'll talk. Steph, Gunny, everybody out there, Lisa, we made a cameo for a second. Allison, Tana, all of you guys. Steven. Also want to say shout out to Danny. Thanks for following Strange Days. Sundays, tune in 6 to 8. The show's always evolving. Appreciate you guys showing up. Hope you guys have a great night. And Bryan, thanks again.
Oh, my pleasure, Dave. Everybody be safe.
Yes. Be safe. Feel the love. Be strange. Have fun. See ya.